What's your opinion on abortion rights or women's reproductive rights?
Yo, I was totally into abortion. I has been responsible for at least 5, so, you know, I was well up for it.
Find out what abortion is! Find out what it is!
What be your name?
Father Dean Schultz.
Yo, respect. Say, is you very anti-abortions because you yourself was aborted?
No, I wasn't aborted.
So you ain't never got a whole preggers? You ain't never got a whole preggers?
No.
So is that because you use connies or does you fire blanks?
This interview is over.
I wouldn't recommend staying up for the Thursday one. you could probably. I wouldn't recommend staying up for the Thursday one. Yeah, went stash. It's a half measure. La da 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 da. All right. People gonna be coming through tonight or what? Just give it a minute. Hey, what's up, Don? Coming through, yeah. So, the fall goes on forever. Multiple records in multiple years of the discography. Absolutely ridiculous if you're not familiar with them, don't know where to start, etc. It's a band that, you know, and you also have like the opposite of the cool cult tax is in some cases you'll get the cancellation tax. So like the Fall and Marky Smith, the current climate is at pains to deal with the fact that, you know, he could have given a shit what anyone thinks about anything and was totally impolitic and, you know, iconoclastic. I mean, definitively. And, you know, I mean, they're just such a struggle. People have such a hard time separating art from artist. And I don't. And, you know, probably anyone to be watching this doesn't either. But it's just funny because I think about, you know, going forward, is this a band that's going to be even recommended to people? Like, are they going to get their due? Are people going to like remember how important this band is? Yeah, John Lydon is a sort of a different case because, I mean, he made an ass of himself in so many ways, but most of the things that Lydon, so there's two sides to it. There's the stuff he did to make money because his daughter was dying of cancer and in-law, and, you know, his wife is dying of Alzheimer's and whatever, or I think that's what it was. Like, there's the celebrity get me out of here bullshit. That part of John Lydon is totally forgivable. Like, there's no notion of selling out. With him, there really never was because he's an anti-artist in so many respects. The problem with him is when he's like there's that famous interview where he loses his shit screaming at Henry Rollins. And it's this whole, like, I am punk. I am the only thing that's ever been punk. There is no punk except me. I am punk incarnate. Like, the fact that he's not, the fact that he's still stumped on that for so long that's the embarrassing part with Lydon, for me anyway. But with Marky Smith and the Fall, it's a completely different situation. And I mean, there's like literal violence here. Like it's not debatable. You know, I didn't pay a lot of attention to that incident that occurred in New York City. You know, people who were there, basically the story is that he physically struck a woman on stage that was in his band. Like, that's super fucking not okay. Does that mean that the entire discography of the Fall is like verboten? No. It means he was a psychotic alcoholic and speed freak. The fact that he even lived as long as he did is insane if you know or have read anything about him. So there's 2 books you want to get if you're curious about the fall, academically, sort of. One is Mark's own book, Rebel, which is phenomenal. It's just hilarious. He's just talking shit. The other is Cy Wollstonecraft's, sorry if I'm mispronouncing his last name, I should have pulled it, his book. And so, let me pull it up. He drummed for the fall, Wollstonecraft, excuse me. So Simon Wollstonecraft's book, You Can Drum But You Can't Hide, from 2014, absolutely stellar. It's one of the best rock memoirs I've ever read. I strongly recommend anyone, like, even if you're just generally interested in any kind of view or history of the 80s. Oh, sorry, it's called Renegade, not Rebel. Thank you. Mark E. Smith's book, Renegade. That's the good one. But Cy Wollstonecraft's book is really phenomenal. And then, it's just he's a working drummer. He's not just in the fall. He drummed for Ian Brown when he went solo after Stone Roses broke up, and he's just got all these really incredible stories of kind of what it's like, trying to work in music at this time. So yeah, recommend those books. But if you're wanting to collect the fall, it's really not hard. There aren't authoritative editions of fall records that you need to really concern yourself with getting, because the fall worked cheap. Marquis Smith was all about the process, about repeating the process and continuing to push out and release new material. And so the records never really sound great. Plus he wants spontaneity all the time. That's Marquis Smith's whole thing. He's like, the second we do it twice, it sucks. We've lost all the originality and energy. He wants the mistakes. He wants the first takes. He wants the jamming. And at various points, there's a number of phases to a band that's been around for this long. You have the truly innovative first post-punk material, even though they've been around and been playing, jamming, conceptually doing whatever for a long time. They don't put anything out until Dragnet in '79, really. And so they're sort of, they debut and become like a talking point, much like Joy Division, not necessarily in relation to punk, but in relation to the Winter of Our Discontent, which is essentially 1979 in England, the dawn of Thatcherism. All these other themes are far more important than the exuberance and novelty of punk, which is really burned out and is gone by 78 even. I mean, there's still tons of people finding out about it, but it's become a pantomime kind of fashion statement thing, and the music is complete shit, and it's not far from getting to, UK 81, 82, oi, shit, and then it, America Takes and does its own thing. The Fall are not like a band that is twinned with that, despite the fact that Marquis Smith was there. He's at one of the two, if he's not at the first one, he might be at the Lesser Free Trade. He's at one of the early Sex Pistols shows. He's just around, similar to Morrissey. He's clocking everything. But he's a speed freak. He's a crazy fucking speed freak. And he's open about it. He said in his book, he says, I'm someone for whom amphetamines are relaxing. He claims that when he takes speed, he feels calm. I don't know how this is possible, and I sincerely doubt it, but it's a great book. There's some fucking hilarious stories. And in Cy's book, he talks about him doing absolutely 2 7-inch rails of speed, and just drinking whiskey out the bottle all day. It's insane. If you think about, yeah, I drank a jar of coffee and then I took 10 of these and now I'm totally wired. I mean, it's just there are legendary promoted drug addicts and drug abusers, and then there's the Marquis Smiths of the world, the Shane McGowans of the world, the Al Jorgensens of the world, people who should not be alive, for whom this was not performative. This wasn't look, Kurt Cobain's a junkie and suicidal, whatever, right? But I kind of think he was buying into a bit of an image with that. The dude from the Strokes, it was the drummer, right, who got Fab, who got hooked on heroin for a while, and he was like, I have known since I was 9 years old I wanted to do heroin. You know what I mean? It's just part of the image that he was into and fixated on. like he wanted to do heroin performatively to fulfill the sense of knowing what that was like. And like, that's going to make him part of the heroin club. Marky Smith is just something totally different. It's nuts. And again, read those books if you want to get a sense of it. But it is insane. It was Albert, the guitarist. Sorry. Thank you very much. Yeah. I mean, I love the Strokes music, but like having come up and been around at the time they were blowing up, like I'm not interested in their history, like, because I was there, and like they're just a bunch of fucking rich kids that were doing their shit, and I fucking love them, and they're an amazing band. But bands from England in the late 70s are alien to me, so it's an academic thing, and I'm also American, so it's all like what you learn, and so it's necessarily mediated. It's the same way Americans have such a different worship when they did of Bowie in the phases he did. So with The Fall, if you're going to start collecting them and you don't know anything about this band, or like you're just into, let's say, indie rock, like let's say, okay, you're a Pavement fan, you don't want to start with the early stuff. The really early stuff is it's so funny. Like I honestly would liken it to jazz in the sense of it being drawn out, extemporaneous, shout speak poetry, and just confrontational. Like, look, if you don't know, there is a song where Marky Smith says the N-word. Okay, we're that far back in history. Whether this is considered some kind of artistic dare and he's trying to push an envelope, who cares? But that's out there in one of their most famous songs. And there's an apocryphal joke that at some point Motown wanted a demo from The Fall and heard this song. Now that's probably bullshit, but that was the kind of joke that was going around trying to illustrate, this is a problem that you did this, for a lot of people. But back then, different world. Anyway, if you're sort of a casual indie rock, pavement-y fan of underground rock and roll or whatever, you probably want to be, in my estimation, starting with Perverted by Language, which has got a good blend of the raw and also starting to get like straight ahead structures. And then if you like more polished kind of new wavy sounding stuff, or more modern bands like I'm not making a Sonic comparison, but modern bands that are really slick and well produced, like whatever we would talk about, like Big Thief or something. I don't know. I mean, they don't sound anything like them, but if you like slicker, cleaner stuff, the late 80s is into the 90s is like this period where he's with this woman called Brix, who he met in Chicago, and they kind of instantly fell in love, and that's a whole other story we'll get into. Ultimately, if you've not heard The Fall, my recommendation is to start with one of my favorite LPs of all time, but it's a compilation, which is Palace of Swords Reverse from 1987. This is released on Cog Sinister, which is The Fall's label, and it is the guide to early 80s singles. The kind of sound of this band that's the most kind of approachable and agreeable. And I have this on vinyl just because it's such an iconic sleeve for me, and I want to be able to read the liner notes, which I can't on a CD anymore because I am old. But I do, funnily enough, have this on CD as well, which is far rarer, especially to find in America. And the craziest thing about it is that I found it in an upstate New York grocery store called Price Chopper for $6.99 shrink wrapped. No joke. 1994 in college. This was shrink wrapped. It was part of like a whole. So the mob ran a record chain in New England called Strawberries. It was run by the Genovese crime family, like straight up. It was fronting and laundering mob money. There were a number of Strawberries franchises, and they participated in this scheme that was occurring in the 80s, which is that unsold CDs would be mass warehoused and wrapped up in trucks and pallets, and just cycled all around New England and all over the East Coast, really, until their reach wears out. And Strawberries wasn't the only chain participating in this. So like, you would eventually get like a time decay where something fell into this status, and it would just go anywhere. And somehow this ended up in a Price Chopper in Saratoga Springs, New York. And it's just phenomenal. Like it was the funniest thing, and it has only gained in hilarity over the years when I've seen how record collecting and scarcity and things work. It's absolutely absurd that happened. One of my funnier record geek stories. But so yeah, Palace of Swords Reverse. This compilation is going to get you all the really catchy early post-punky kind of singles, like How I Wrote Plastic Man, aka Elastic Man, Pink Press Threat, Prolar Threat. Two of my favorite, and honestly, the song that most people get into the fall through from this period, Kicker Conspiracy. This was a really kind of, this presages, this is the song where Marquis Smith has a famous quote where he says, like, fucking Pavement driving around in my BMW, and he's right. Pavement was an absurd ripoff of this band in so many respects, more than REM, more than anything else. And Kicker Conspiracy is really like, in Wings, which is more of a drone kind of song. These two, this was a one single. These two are probably my absolute favorites. But Kicker Conspiracy is actually an approachable mid-tempo song, with some good changes. And it's one that, if you want to understand what this band sounds like and whether or not you want to explore them, I would say go there. Fit and Working Again also is just such a cute, it's like, it's got like it's got bones in it. And it's just got a really loud acoustic guitar. It's only like 2 minutes long. It's such a good tune. All of these are, and you get a good blend too. Totally Wired is like the most post-punk, Tom Dunga Dunga song they have. But An Older Lover is on here too, which is an interesting way to get exposure to their kind of like dark, winter, frigid, long form drone, kind of German, very German, hollow pieces. And those are all over. One of the most famous ones in the early days is Garden. Which is that grotesque or perverted? I forget. It's perverted, isn't it? Is that where Garden is? Yeah, Garden. 8.5 minutes long, and it's so good. Like, this record, again, if you wanted to start properly with an LP to listen to front to back, for me, it's perverted by language. It always has been. Now, because of my age and taste, I differ with a lot of people and with my peers at the time in Pitchfork, who were all about This Nation's Saving Grace, which is a totally mid-tempo record that I'm not a huge fan of. By this point, you've got Brix in the band, and Brix is, saying, like, we should make pop songs, and you're fantastic, Mark, and I love you, and do this. Garden is one of the greatest songs ever, man. I just absolutely love it. But this record, This Nation's Saving Grace, is the one that like a lot of Americans first heard, and it's very mid-tempo. Bombast, L.A., Spoiled Victorian Child, like these are relatively approachable mid-tempo songs. So like, you could get into this and like it. If you're into that, you're really going to be like, the breaking point is where it transitions is Wonderful and Frightening World, which I love. Like, this is a monster friggin' record. And the thing with the fall is, on the CDs, there's so many editions where there's like 50 fucking songs on it. It's hilarious. But Lay of the Land, I love this record. It's really overlooked because people tend to go for Perverted, which is kind of the perfection of their early 80s, songwriting change. And then, Wonderful and Frightening World is this like in-between moment where things have started to change. And it's when Brix comes in. She's already in, but it's when she really starts to change it. So you don't have stuff like Tempo House and Garden. You have more Neighborhood of Infinity, which is basically like it's like a straight ahead 4/4 rock song. She takes that and pushes the band in that direction. And Mark wants to go with her. They're together, they're in love, whatever. And this stuff really peaks on the Friends Experiment. This is where they're doing dance songs, which is Hit the North. And Friends, it's, and they do a cover of the Kinks' Victoria, which is actually a fantastic cover. One of my favorite covers, kind of ever. Because it's got that period, late 80s kind of drum production. You've also got some long, crazy stuff on here like Brother Knox. But this is one where Hit the North's not on the album proper. It's a non-album single. And so this is where you start talking about maybe deluxe editions, because the fall are all, again, like I said at the top, they're all about output. There are so many good songs, and it's like what ends up on the record and what doesn't, and what ends up on B-sides, like it's sort of indistinguishable, and everybody has their favorites, and it sort of doesn't matter where they're from. So, you know, this is sort of their peak in terms of being taken seriously as a straight English band. Like from 86 with Ben Sinister, this is the first record that actually gets distribution in the United States, is Ben Sinister, which is a pretty contested, controversial record in terms of the, you know, Fall fans, what they think of it. A lot of people, like, saying Ben Sinister is your favorite Fall record is like saying The Top is your favorite Cure record. Like it's a really dark, indulgent, dirging, effed up record. It's a major slab of like, you know, just again, dark, indulgent, punishing shit. It's interesting though, like Craig Scanlon, the guitarist, this record is a really underappreciated example of his stuff. And I don't think Mark really had his shit together on this record. This is Wollstonecraft's one, I think his first or second record with him. Can't remember. Maybe I have that backwards. It's the second to last. I can't remember. Anyway, this is a really fascinating record for fans. Yeah, shoulder pads number one. That's a rocker. That's a ripper. But it's from there they go for it. And you have they do this ballet performance, which is absolutely insane. And this very extremely slickly produced record, I Am Curious Orange, with New Big Prince, which is like a straight up, it's like, it's just like think about like Love and Rockets or something. It's just this awesome floor tom, you know, blues scale climbing drone. And Mark is just howling. Like it's one of their strongest tracks. And then you have this really, you know, strange, emotional kind of plucking guitar ballad in I forget, is it Jerusalem or Curious Orange, the title track, the one that's like yeah, it's the Gary Glitter beat on New Big Prince, 100%. Anyway, one of these songs is very beautiful and not like The Fall at all. It's totally a Brick song in the sense that it's like straight up mid-80s kind of gothy plucking, and I mean, Mark's there howling in it or whatever, but, you know, right at the beginning, there's some really strong, heavily commercially produced stuff on this record, and it could be a really good entry point. And, you know, in England, finding Fall CDs is pretty much, again, drink coasters. It's not going to be hard. They were on beggars all throughout the 80s. These records have constantly stayed in print. Where it gets a little dicier, so like you've gone through, I didn't talk about the really, really early stuff. This is where it's just like crazy on speed, jamming, basically recorded live, absolute lunacy. And the drawn out jams, Spectre vs. Rector and the stuff like that, this isn't really kind of my favorite Fall move, you know. The long jams like No Christmas for Jake Junkway and you know, NWRA and the classical and stuff like that. The on Hex is really where this peaks, and it's absolutely just nuts. The classical and Winter and into Winter 2 and This Day is almost 11 minutes. This is a whole different vibe. Hit Priest is infamously one of their, you know, most cherished anthems, but this 8-minute jamming poetry jam stuff, that's the early part of the Fall, and that's something that you know is or isn't for you. If you're into that kind of like Zappa, Beefheart, crazy, you know, authentic personality jam thing where you know, or Can maybe, I mean, obviously Marky Smith was massively influenced by all the Faust and the German krautrock bands. If that's what you're into, you do actually want to dive headlong into early Fall. And again, if you're starting out, there's so many good compilations. This is one of my favorites. I had reviewed this on Pitchfork when it got reissued in 03, I think. This very similar to Palace of Swords. If you got this, the early years comp, which is their tight, short, early singles, if you get this and Palace of Swords reversed, you've got like the first two waves of the Fall really nicely buttoned up. What you don't have is the jams. And for the jams, you want to get Hex Induction Hour, and you want to get, you know, potentially Dragnet, but there's also a compilation that is really also appropriate for that stuff. But here you've got like one of my favorite fall tunes ever, which is Second Dark Age. It was one of the first songs that really got me hooked on them big time. Psycho Mafia and Bingo Master's Breakout and Repetition. These three songs are the start of the fall in the popular consciousness. This is when John Peel is like, this is such a Mancunian real English band. They have a real voice, the same way people said that shit about Morrissey and the Smiths. The Fall were really twinned with a lot of social status, stuff. There's a really nuanced persona that Marky Smith represents that was immediately recognized by Peel and by a lot of people for its kind of sneering, detached disregard or whatever. I mean, you're getting into the whole northerner southerner thing, and these nuances are not something an American's going to be able to speak authoritatively about. But if you think about the fact that, essentially Stephen Morrissey and Marky Smith are like living down the street from each other and are like essentially not that far apart in age. And they both come out and do these two different things that are so dramatically different and yet are both recognized as extraordinarily local. Salt of Salford, salt of, the Mancunian working class, whatever. I mean, Macclesfield, you name it, Marky Smith is from an area, a really specific area that I'm forgetting that's like up here, and there's Macclesfield, again, I don't need to know this, but actual neighborhoods have such more definition, in cities like Manchester and in England. So the nuance of that is probably going to be lost on you if you're an American listener, and that's fine. You don't need it. But the further you try to understand it, it's actually very rewarding to the extent that you can, and we can't. Press Switch, thank you. Somebody came through. Stayed up late for that if you're actually over there. So he's from Prestwich, which this means something really dramatic to somebody from Salford. And you if you ever say Salford, you get stabbed. There's it's salt, it's Salford. That's a really big deal. And this is important because I'm a guy who's mispronounced some place names in these streams and been battered ruthlessly and deservedly for it. Anyway, Rouch Rumble, I probably mispronounced that. There's this whole thing is just all the early, tight, short, pogoing speed shit. So that, this is the other comp I was talking about. Hit Priests and Comrades. This has got the jams. So here you're getting Hit Priests, you're getting Mere Sud Mag Editor, you're getting Hard Life in the Country, I'm into CB. These are this comp was so epically legendary. And now I'm sure there's an edition that's just 75 track deluxe edition. I actually have this too. This is the first thing they released in America. I found this somewhere for $1. This is just like when The Cure did Boys Don't Cry and PVC signed up to do a comp and take a flyer on breaking an English band in America. PVC did a shitty maxi single called The Fall. And it's just it's not even a good track list. It's just absolutely bizarre. It's such a weird thing that happened. I can't imagine paying anything for that. So, as I say, The Fall, if you're getting started, go for the comps. 77 to 79 early years, Palace of Swords Reversed, and then A-sides. So it's all three of these phases are perfectly collected. When you get A-sides, you're getting LA, you're getting Cruiser's Creek, Creep, all the hits from that Bricks 80s period. Victoria, Big New Prince, Jerusalem, that was the one I was thinking of. They excised the Dog Is Whatever piece. Jerusalem is the emo song. With A-sides, you're getting all that. And you get Hit the North, the non-album dance single, which is essentially right in there with Baggy. You really, really want to get this, these comps, because there's no shame in buying comps if you're trying to, learn about a band. And unfortunately, I doubt you're going to find Palace cheap, even though it's been reissued. There's a lot of copies in the States. That's good to see, but only 9 CDs and not looking great. Holy shit, somebody wants $50 for this? Oh, weird. Okay, I guess there was a numbered edition reissue of this. Limited edition, including bonus CD. And the bonus CD is going to be live, right? Oh my God, what a bunch of dog shit. You gotta, oh, that's not fair. So all these copies are the friggin' this stupid numbered deluxe, except for these two, and they only want $14. I mean, look, this is worth that. Absolutely 100% worth it. I mean, these are such great, iconic, unique songs. There's no band that's ever sounded like this except to rip them off. So, I would say, yeah, I'm sure all of this is cheap in the UK. Again, I mean, this is going to be biased heavily towards America to understand how distorted the market is over here. So yeah, for $33 for the LP. Do not get this numbered reissue because the 4-song live bonus CD, and I mean, COG put it out. I don't know why. Get the original issue. Some cassettes. I know we have somebody who's a big cassette collector. This would be a hot one to get. But anyway, get the original CD. You know, if it's 14, 15, even $20, to me, it's totally worth it. But, you know, your financial circumstances are going to dictate that. The early years comp, again, this one was not on a big label, and there's a bunch of probably cash-in reissues. This doesn't look good. There's only 2 CDs. Well, $15. I would do that in a minute. I mean, it's $30 is a lot of money for some people, but like, look, if you got Spotify and Netflix, come on, let's be real. Hip Priest, this has got to be cheap. This is, I mean, saturated. Yeah, good. All right, this is probably much easier. Yeah, that's one. Yeah, 686, 650, boom. So yeah, there you go. This is a great way to affordably find out about the kind of protracted jamming fall period. And honestly, if you're a Gen Xer like me, this cover is totally iconic. As weird and stupid as it is, the color, everything, I just see that and it's like, you know, I remember that one. But that's an advantage here, again, is that you can do this with comps. A-side, this should literally be a 50 cent. Like, there's no way you should be paying more than $5 for this ever. I mean, to say nothing of if you're in the UK, but even in the States, this was a major release. It was absolutely nationally distributed, big time. And yeah, so 5, it looks like, is where we're trying to, I mean, that's rich if you're in the UK. Here, it's bearable, but this thing was like $1 and should be, honestly. There's so many copies of this goddamn thing. So look out for that, you know, because I mean, it was produced in such numbers that you probably can find it in retail brick and mortars. The B-sides one, which is even longer, as you'd expect, being a B-sides comp is a little bit sillier, but you do get Creep and some others Clear Off that are great. But it's, you know, it's up through this point, through the 80s and 90s, you're able to get this really wonderful summary of the band on 3 distinct compilations, and that's really how I'd recommend you go. After that point, it just becomes like awful cash-in crap, the Receiver Records period, Castle gets involved, Castle Communications, and you can just see this whole thing becomes like Marky Smith fighting with labels not wanting to spend money on them, him being volatile, and you know, essentially Castle Music ends up being, you know, as a budget reissue kind of effort, they end up doing all these comps, and they're really repetitive. It's the New Thing, the Step Forward years, and then the Totally Wired comp, which is excellent. This came out, I reviewed this on Pitchfork as well. This is a really, really good start as well, and you can probably get it for nothing. It loses the kind of iconic real-time period correct aspect of Palace of Swords, of 77, 79, and of, you know, Hip Priests and Camarades and even A-sides. This is a pure basket. It doesn't feel like the way, because it's such a survey, I guess is what I'd say. It's a survey. So it doesn't feel like the way those compilations felt. It doesn't present an image of the fall that was presented in real time with a purpose. It's totally retrograde and all over the place. But essentially, this is an expanded version of Palace of Swords reversed. And, you know, it looks like it's about the same price, and it has more songs. You do get Winter on here. It just, again, for me as a collector, I want something that has sort of, you know, historical accuracy, period correctness, etc., and this does not. If you don't care, you don't care. This is another great way to get a review of early 80s fall. And, you know, after that, it starts to get, you know, people start trying to do the expensive, silly shit because let's cash in because it's the fall. And Cherry Red gets in here, does this ridiculous box set, all the singles, you know, how many CDs is this thing? 7? You know, look, I'm not a fan of what's happened with people trying to do high ticket box sets. It's just so cheesy and it's just unnecessary because there's so many CDs that are out there. This one, this would be great to get, but it's probably not going to be cheap. I mean, the fall on vinyl is not what you want. This box set here, you know, look, it's going for $25. If you ever see it, I absolutely recommend this. It's the 2 CD deluxe editions of all 3 of the Fontana records, and I absolutely love these records. They're really overlooked. They weren't commercially successful at all. They're, you know, they come from a kind of downward trajectory in terms of Marky Smith and the Fall's whole presence. They were sort of essentially ignored. This is all happening during dance pop, baggy, and then even grunge by the time of the later stuff. So if you see this, this is a great way to get the sort of authoritative versions of these 3 records, which again, these are sort of fan period fall stuff. But it is a great way to get them if you can find it. What is that box set going for? The Cherry Red one, starting at $50, and the A-sides shortened version starting at 18. It's Cherry Red. I mean, look, Cherry Red's fine. They're not like Fire Records bad, but I'm just not a fan of that whole thing. That whole, you know, like I say, the marketing of high ticket box sets, it's not for me. You just have so many cheaper options. If you just take your time, you know, over time, get a few here and there, and you can get a much richer look. So as I say, this is the Fontana period. After that commercial peak, they get the deal with Fontana because Beggars moves off them, and they do Extricate, Shift Work, and Code Selfish. Now, those, again, I'm a fan of them, Extricate especially, but they are heavy. But then after that, they go into a different phase, which starts with the infotainment scam. And what happens here is that they sign with Matador Records in America. And these get promoted to all the new indie rock fans that are coming out that maybe are about to hear Guided by Voices, etc. I think Matador made a smart decision getting these because they're actually pretty cool records. The problem is at this point, the Fall are old. They're an old band. They've been around forever. And so no one's like getting introduced to them via these records is a little bit strange. But like Middle Class Revolt, there's tons of great stuff on these records. They are kind of dancey and funny. There's synths in some places. You know, Pass Gone Mad, great. And you know, they're not lights out strong records, but it's a really interesting little period. It doesn't last, unfortunately, because immediately after that, it dumps out and you get the Castle Records period coming in. And the worst sort of, you know, problem is the Receiver Records period, because this is actually some of the Fall's strongest work. In the late 90s, Marky Smith, he could have probably died. His alcoholism was so bad at this period. Yeah, and he was having so many interpersonal issues. He was just really straight up fucked up. It was bad. And what came out of it, though, is some of the band's strongest and craziest material. The run here for me is Light User Syndrome, Levitate, and the Marshall Suite. Now, there's a whole bunch of other shit spread around in here. There's, you know, that's all cobbled together and whatever. But these 3 records, if you want to check out some of the heaviest stuff, and the Unutterable too. It's 4. Because Light User is kind of weird. It's like this is the peak of Britpop, and you know Brix is back in the band, and they're doing this like really, you know, well promoted kind of all over the place record that has lots of different sounds to it. Cheatham Hill's always been a lot of people's favorites. There's a lot of, like DIY Meat's awesome, the opening track. There's good stuff on this. But I guess I would say that one's a little bit lighter, and it's really Levitate, Marshall Suite, and The Unutterable, where it's like crazy heavy. This stuff is I would say, unfortunately overlooked. Like someone who's an academic, who's into kind of music historically, whatever, they may not understand how strong and how dark and how cool the Fall's output was at this time. And, whether these records are easy to find or not, I'm not sure. They run hot and cold. At the time, they were everywhere because no one was buying them. And so they were really easy to get. Levitate looks like, yeah, it's like a $10 situation on Discogs anyway, but, look out for it, because Fall's a record store, record collector, record geek band. So in retail stores, they usually trade pretty heavy. Like record stores get Fall records and have had Fall records for years. So this might be one where in some cases you're going to be better off. Yeah, Marshall Suite's not coming in. So this has their probably their greatest pop anthem, which is Touch Sensitive, leading it off. There's an amazing dance remix with like a 4 on the floor oompa beat over it. It's just a simple like EG, like there's nothing to the song, but it's so good. There's all these cute little short kind of blurts in this record that I thought were hilarious and fun and disposable. And then of course they came back with this, which is one of the harshest, craziest, darkest records they ever did. Dr. Buck's Letter is an absolute like murderous fucking tune. It is so brilliant and just grinding, chugging, heavy shit. The whole record, Two LeBrons, is such a fucking bomb too. Even Sons of Temperance, like this is one of their strongest records, and it caps this run, as I say, of really kind of a renaissance, if you will, in the mid and late 90s for the band. The World of Tong, yeah, that's one of the ones. I lost my temper with a friend, mocked him and treated him with a rudeness. So then they kind of go sideways a little bit. Again, there's this like, are we coming back? And then a bunch of crazy comps and shit get kicked out. Are You Missing Winter? This is fantastic. I love this. I have this on CD. And this is all kind of, detritus, but some of it's great. Kick the Can, Crop Dust or whatever. Yeah, so good. But then they did all this reissue stuff on Cog Sinister, and this is all Mark, like stuff he's like kind of puking out, and it's super sketchy. Like this 83 Reykjavik show, this sounds so bad, but it is a great performance, and it's that jam period where it's like all 8-minute songs. I seem to remember this just being an extremely blown out bootleg kind of tape that does not sound very good. But out the other side of that, you get the Real New Fall LP. So this is the one that leaked. This was supposed to be called Country on the Click, and it leaked. So this is 2003. This is the era of leaks. And this record leaked, and Marky Smith was like super pissed about it, and he changed it. I think he even re-recorded some of it. Like, it's fucking crazy. But Theme from Sparta FC, Protein Protection, Janet, Johnny, and James. There's some good jams on this. By this point, though, the Fall has definitely become like a thing. Like, it's Mark gets in, going to Spain. Yeah, totally. Mark gets in and a headspace where it just becomes like bang it out. And a lot of the stuff is, it's just not, it doesn't really stand up. It's not extraordinary. And his health is starting to fail, honestly, already at this point. But there are a couple of high points at the end you want to check out. Imperial Wax Solvent, I think Mark rated this super high in the catalog. It is a strong record, and I definitely recommend checking it out if you're wanting to go deep and understand all the different phases of the discography. But there's just, at this point, the whole thing is really falling apart and getting crazy. This, no, not Last Night at the Palace. Where is it? I missed Reformation post TLC. This is another one that this is such a wonderful cover. It's so good. This is another one you definitely want to check out. And this should be, these 2000s ones, these should be $2 all day. heavily still in Cirque and all over the place. So it's, yeah. Well, I don't know what this edition is. Narnak Records. Yipes. Well, that's an appealing cover. Didn't know about that. Try and get the slogan edition if you can. There's one for $5. That's pretty sweet. It's, again, there's a couple of highlights, surprisingly, at the end, as the band is becoming, I don't want to say stubborn, but it's becoming this thing where this is what Mark does, and he just keeps doing it. And at some point, he's like getting wheeled into the studio here. It's a rough time, and everything starts to go downhill, and I don't, where is like the last interesting thing? I don't know. Does anybody have like an opinion, like where this ended? You know what I mean? I'm just curious, because there are a couple of people here who've been, definitely fans who know about the band. But for me, it's pretty much like Reformation TLC is the last one I spent any real time with. Blindness on Jules Holland was the first thing I saw. Wow. Okay. That's out. That's way out. Anyway, they're a really important band and various phases of them. And again, the fact that compilations give you such a good window into them. Auto Chip is the last great song. All right, I'll go back to it. See what I think. They were around forever. They were so many different things. It's somebody who just never stopped doing what he was doing. And, they're, you can find your place, like, which part of this band is the part that speaks to you. I didn't mention slates. And so this, essentially, if you're going to get this, you're going to look for the compilation, which is a twofer, Slates and Apart America therein. This is one that you really want to get. As I say, a lot of this is duplicated on the Palace of Swords Reverse compilation, but you get An Older Lover, you get Winter. This thing is just an amazing slice of what they were doing in 81, 82 as they transitioned into this grotesque, the album Grotesque and Perverted by Language and Hex Induction Hour. This run here has its own flavor. And if you're into it at all, there's so much strong stuff. Grotesque, it's like not there yet, but it's, the NWRA is one of their most infamous, famous songs. You get New Face in Hell, which is fantastic. To call a fall song overlong is kind of missing the point, but I do think they could have made New Face in Hell like a relatively cool pop song almost, and it drags a bit. But, Impression J Temperance, NWRA Pay Rates, New Face in Hell, these are all like classic fall tunes. And this really, again, if you're kind of into alternative, indie, underground, punky, kind of shambolic music, this run, Grotesque through to Perverted by Language, that's your sweet spot. If you want to figure out whether or not the fall's for you, that's how you can get your answer pretty quickly. So I would recommend that as a focal point. Again, if you're somebody who likes like Echo and the Bunnymen and The Cure and well-produced straight ahead music, you want to start with Wonderful Frightening, This Nation's Saving Grace, and go up through Curious Orange. Trying to explain who would be into the Fontana stuff and then the kind of, honkin', more upbeat. If you're looking for stuff with more energy, that's kind of funny and snarky and whatever, Infotainment Scan and Middle Class, those two, because you can get them for almost nothing, I would assume. I didn't look, did I? Yeah, $2.99 all day. Middle Class too. These should, in America it was on Matter. There should be so many copies of these. That's a fun little period that you can get checked out for cheap. It's an unending discography. It's got so many phases, and they're such an important canonical band. I'm not going to tell anybody how to approach what their attitude is toward, again, like I say, art and artist. But I just, what's captured on the records, the persona, the personality, it's blaringly loud in a way that very few bands ever accomplish. Nobody puts through the amount of who they are and where they're speaking from cerebrally that Marky Smith did. There's very few artists that have ever even been close. And he doesn't even sing. You know, I mean, it's poetry, it's combative, it's very much in the school of a Velvet Underground in that way. It is not intended as a song in that way. And even the songs that are songs in that classic way, and even during the pop period, have such a sneer and a wink to them. It's just, it's really just, there's no, to me, there's just no band like this, never has been, never will be. And there are so many bands that were created and inspired to create by witnessing and hearing and feeling the authenticity of what this guy and what this band did. It should absolutely be celebrated forever. You know, you're gonna throw away like 30 years of some of the greatest fucking most original rock music ever because the guy was an alcoholic and he fucked up, you know, numerous times. But I mean, I think that was also silly too. Like everyone was ecstatic to talk about Marky Smith's behavior and try to, you know, this is before real like cancel culture was even really that much of a thing. Everybody was so psyched to go off on and gossip and rubbish Marky Smith. No one wanted to talk about the fact that the guy's a fucking alcoholic and he had been in his entire life. This guy drank 24/7 his whole fucking life. I mean, he was absolutely a grade A diagnostic alcoholic. And there's a lot of like psychological issues and like he's also a drug addict. He did amphetamines. He did all, I mean, it's the selective way in which we react to artists that behave in problematic ways. I mean, I hate that fucking word problematic. Like who gives a shit? If you care, why? Like where is the connection? Like Marky Smith doesn't fucking account to you. It's just silly. And the artist always wins out. Artists always win out because they leave the legacy. The people who are chirping about them, they never accomplish shit. And you know, yeah, there've been some successful rock writers and whatever that would love to, you know, lay out in print, you know, what a piece of shit Marky Smith is. You know, I think about when fucking Sean Hughes died, you know, another alcoholic who drank himself literally to death, and the shit people were writing about him, like right after he died, people were outraged. They were just like, this is fucking horrible. What are you doing? There was a really infamous, I think, Guardian piece where like they got more letters than they like ever got of people who were just aghast at how grotesquely gossipy and priggish and tut-tutting, you know, this fucking obituary of this guy was. Most of these people only knew him because he was like a BBC talking head comic. They didn't know that he was like, you know, dark and fucked up. And why does that have to become the narrative? Because it's prurient and you want to get your fucking nose in there.